know you probably saw the title and you went, this is the most generic video that she could have come out with on this subject. After all of the other ones, it had to be this one. I know, and I know it's just really generic. I know everything in it's probably going to be generic, but I had to come out with a video like this that just had all of the reasons in kind of dot point form. So I'm just going to do this, and then I promise there'll be more exciting content coming out. So bear with me. There are three main things that I want to talk about in this video about, surprise, surprise, why I'm not a feminist. And they kind of fall into these categories of men's issues and the demonization of men, how it negatively affects society as a whole, as all of us, and just my personal reasons and experience. So it is no surprise, and you can't deny that feminism hates men. And I know maybe first and second wave feminism, that shouldn't apply, but you can't deny that the people that are the loudest now, and the people that are just saying all of this shit about men, these feminists, there are way too many of them to just say that this is the vocal minority. And I know that there are really, really nice feminists out there, and there are people like Christina Hoff Sommers, who I really admire, but a lot of feminists don't even consider her a feminist, because she doesn't have this same I hate men kind of rhetoric that they do. We have safe schools, which basically teaches young white boys that they are the bane of society. They are the things that everything goes wrong because of. They're the reason for that. And that they should accept all of that and be this scapegoat for everybody. It's like they cause domestic abuse, they cause rape, even though they're like 8 years old or something. That is abuse in my book. I don't care what anybody says. If I was a mother and I saw that happening, I would pull my child out of that school and probably sue them. And in general, even if you don't go to a safe school, they are just so focused on treating boys like defective girls. And it's just very unfriendly for a boy to grow up in that environment. They don't really recognize that boys need to just play fight with each other and just be a bit more rough, and they're a bit more energetic, and they have a bit more adrenaline and aggression because of masculinity, which is not a toxic thing. Just let them grow up as boys. I don't see what's so bad about that. Just because they don't act like girls, just because boys and girls are different, that doesn't mean that they're not equal. Like, you can't treat them equally. People can be different and equal at the same time. It's fine. I don't see why you have to make boys into girls in order to make everything work out. One of the biggest issues that kind of made me start this channel and talk about the stuff in this way is just because I saw all of those statistics about the domestic violence and rape of men, how there was so much of that happening, and it's basically equal to women, and they are victims just as much of that, and it's not like they are the sole perpetrators and women are the victims. And what angered me about that was that you always have this kind of narrative of, well, men aren't the victims of it, they don't need support groups, they don't need shelters, they don't need resources. Of course they do. You have people like Aaron Pitsey, and I'm sorry I forget this guy's name, but he was the one who's trying to get the male domestic violence shelters sorted out, and then he got bullied so much by feminists that he committed suicide. I'll put his name in the description if I remember it, but stuff like that, it always happens. There's always a group of angry feminists trying to prevent men from actually getting any help for their issues. That was one of the reasons why I just got so angry seeing all that stuff happen that I had to make something like a video to talk about it, and that's how the channel kind of happened. It just breaks my heart so much to see innocent men and innocent boys, just children, being brainwashed by this, and then men being demonized for something that they didn't do. There will just be some random working class guy with a 9-to-5 job. The only thing that's going through his head as he's walking to work is just, well, gotta make money to feed my family. Just ordinary stuff, and then he's apparently the one that's at fault for all of this. The mainstream media, everybody's just like, well, it's this guy, the working class guy that does nothing wrong. All of those people, blamed for everything. And this is also a reason for one of the other things that I'll be doing on my channel, where every time I upload a video that is either on or near the date of International Men's Day, I'll just be wearing this flower in my hair to just kind of show, hey, it's International Men's Day, and I think it's pretty cool. And also, it's suspiciously not on any of the calendars that I had last year, or the year before, or the ones that I got this year, even though Women's Day is on those, which I just think is odd. And I'll also be just doing a big chunk at the end of the video that is published around that time, just to talk about that a bit so that people know, hey, you know, you should just maybe check on the guy that is in your life that is really special to you, just because people don't really celebrate International Men's Day, even though they should, in my opinion. One of the biggest things that worries me, and the biggest things that just annoys me or breaks my heart, if you will, is that there are people in, say, feminist therapists or something. There are people in therapy, there are people in places where you can seek help, and a man can get raped in prison, he can get abused, he can get all of this stuff happen to him. And then a feminist therapist would be like, well, I mean, first you have to admit about toxic masculinity. And they'll just go through all of this shit that basically victim blames. And yet they blame everybody else of victim blaming when all it is preventative measures. I mean, I don't know if I'd have kids when I'm older, but if I had a boy and a girl, I would treat them both equally. I would recognize that the boy acts a bit differently from the girl, and maybe I wouldn't understand quite exactly what's going through his head, and maybe I would understand the girl a bit easier, but I would recognize that that's not the boy just being a defective girl. I recognize that the boy is just being a boy, and that phrase is around for a reason, because they act differently. And one of the reasons I bring that up is I see articles in the Huffington Post and all of those horrible places about feminists that get triggered because they have a baby and then they realize that the baby they're having is a boy. And then they talk about how they're going to show him what it means to be a man, raise him right, and that kind of translates into this poor child basically is probably going to be abused effectively, at least in my opinion, because the mom is going to tell him all about feminism and all about how women are constantly the victims of men and how he needs to take responsibility for that and how he is born sexist and if he's white, he's born racist. No, that's abuse. One of the huge things I think I'm against is in the society at large is I would say all that stuff in universities, like safe spaces, especially that kind of stuff. I think the original intention for the term safe space was that people could discuss different ideas openly without having to fear something like a backlash or something like that. But it's kind of turned into this new type of thing where it's just you have to only let in certain people that you like, probably that you agree with, in this kind of the Borg kind of thing, which is very counterintuitive to, I guess, the original reason. And I also think that the intersectional type of feminism that you see around, the one where they try to put race into feminism, even though feminism is about gender, that type, I think that I would kind of call that feminism guilt, kind of like white guilt, because if you look at first wave feminism, that was originally intended for middle class white women. It was actually quite just exclusive to this small group, depending on your race, gender, whatever. So I think maybe some people know that and they're just trying to bring it in, partially because of the victim narrative and because of the whole virtue signaling Anna Kasparian I'm better than you kind of thing that they want, so that they can go around and be like, I'm morally better than you because I support brown people or whatever. But I think some of them kind of know what feminism's origins were. And speaking of feminism just as a whole, I know we kind of talk about how first wave feminism and even kind of second wave feminism is not that bad. Well, yeah, I guess so, but it's not that great either. We make it sound like it was great, but it wasn't even close to that. And I know not all groups are perfect, but this one, it doesn't deserve the praise that it gets, really. I mean, you get stuff like the vote, and it wasn't really feminism just making that magically happen. A lot of women could actually vote if they own property. It was the deal with property rights, and the same with men. And for men to vote, they had to sign up for the draft, so while little Julie couldn't go to university, little John didn't get to live because he was going off to fight, regardless of whether he wanted to or not. Feminism, from day one, has always been about treating men like they are just automatically guilty of something without even getting a proper trial to show, hey, this is why you're guilty. It's just, nope, you're guilty of it, and we need feminism because girl power, and you are the enemy. Even though they always say that it's not about hating men, it is. Because you have the enemy. I don't know why you need an enemy. Same thing with Black Lives Matter. I don't know why you need an enemy. You could just talk about how there's poverty in the black community and you need better education and you need all of this stuff, and why don't we just come together and sort it out? Because all of the people that did the damage with slavery or whatever, they're all gone now, they're all dead. So why don't we just come together and sort it out? But no, you have to have a bad guy. Because the bad guy makes you feel more legitimized when you try to be a victim. And I don't agree with that either. I think that's bullshit. The next thing is feminism is basically just supporting the patriarchy. Again, they're walking back into the patriarchy. You see signs like from the Women's March and stuff about the whole Trump thing, and you see them talking about, hey, this is pussy power and everything. Like, all they are is just their vaginas, and yet they tell other people that it's bad. Like, don't treat me like I'm just somebody with a vagina, I have a personality. And yet you're carrying signs that basically says, look at me, I have a vagina, that makes me different and special. You're the one who's doing that to yourself. And also, you're supporting Islam. Have you seen what happens in Islamic countries? Have you seen how people are treated? Do you really think that would be a feminist cause? And you're basically saying, with all the stuff about censorship, we need to censor these words, we need to do all of this sort of stuff to restrict what people will do. You're basically oppressing yourself. You're basically saying, hey, government, you need to get bigger and control us more. You need to put all these restrictions in place and basically oppress people just because you feel you're so frail that you can't take care of yourself. Even when it comes to the third world and dealing with developing countries and all of those things, I still don't really think that feminism is the way to go. Why not just go with an egalitarian approach? Because if you look at young boys, they're going through the same things. They are just going through all of the poverty and all of the war and all of the horrible things that the girls are facing. And yes, I understand that women in Islamic countries are extremely oppressed. It still doesn't make sense to just effectively blame the men. You can blame the systems in place, sure, you can blame the religion, you can blame whatever, but unless you actually go... But instead of just trying to split the genders, you can recognize that both genders need help in different ways. You can see that maybe if you actually show some decency and humanity towards the men, you can start to get the brainwashing, horrible ideas out of their heads and actually get them to be human beings that can think freely. And then in turn, you won't really have that much of a threat against the women because you're actually taking care of the men as well. You're not just letting them grow up in that harsh environment and develop these horrible ideas and then just go after women, because that would make your job harder if you did that. You're trying to protect women, but then you just get these onslaughts of other people coming in. And in some areas, boys that are as young as 5 are being basically sold as prostitutes. And they're being forced to wear women's makeup and having these soldiers basically penetrate them and rape them. And that's really terrifying. And you never really hear about that because they're not women. When it comes down to my own personal experiences and interpretation, you hear all this stuff from intersectional feminists and SJWs about how we need to respect people of color, which, by the way, sounds like colored people. It's colored people. Stop with that. It's annoying. But that just makes me feel like you think that I am too weak-minded and too fragile just because of the color of my skin to take responsibility for my actions, to do the things that I want to do by myself, to be strong enough to handle myself and do these things. That's what it comes off as when you think that you need to speak for me and have this entire army of allies with me just to do one simple thing, and that you have to constantly protect me from people who you also judge by the color of their skin. That just comes off as extremely condescending and extremely hateful and bigoted. I do not want to be judged by the color of my skin and my gender, because I am more than that. I don't care if that's the only thing that you have, and you just want to be the special snowflake that just has those things and nothing else. And your personality is so boring that you cannot make up anything else about yourself. You cannot get a fucking hobby. And you just have to parade around the fact that you have this gender and this race, and that is so important to you. Well, I have more than that. There are more things that I could do, and if I don't have more than that, then I'll make more than that. I will do something else and go out of my way to say that, hey, I have a personality. You don't have to bother with all of this bullshit. Because that's really how that makes me feel. It just makes me feel like a baby. Like, you think of me as an infant. You think of me as less than human, so that's why I need more help. Because I'm too weak to do it. In fact, you're the bigoted ones. I know, surprise, surprise. In one of my older videos, I said something about how you think of the horseshoe theory, about the two extremes on either side being the same, basically, and you have white supremacists, and some of them think that, like, if you have people who aren't white, and maybe, I don't know, women, I don't know if that particular one is the case, but that they're less than human, or they're just dumber, or they're subhuman, or they're like disabled human beings, that kind of thing. It's basically the same thing. I mean, you might not think it, but think about it a bit. These people think that, say, with the Black Lives Matter thing, they think that you should abolish the police. But why? Why abolish the police entirely? Why abolish law entirely? It kind of comes across that they're thinking that non-white people and, just black people or whatever are too weak-minded to actually be expected to follow the law like other people. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like with women, that women are just far too weak-minded to understand what rape is or what taking responsibility when you're getting drunk is. I mean, think of the fact that a man and a woman are drunk and they're having sex, and then in the morning, the woman regrets it, and that's counted as rape, apparently. Or even if she doesn't, that might be counted as rape as well, I guess. And you always hear that defense, and that men can control themselves while they're drunk, but women can't. It's like men suddenly have a stronger mind than women, and that women are too weak-minded that if they get intoxicated, that's just gone out the window, and they shouldn't be expected to take responsibility. And for that matter, it is not victim blaming to discuss preventative measures. Okay, if your friend is going out and you say, like, hey, make sure that when you're with your friend, make sure that you guys look out for each other, make sure that you don't go off with strangers in any weird way, make sure that you watch your drink at all times so that somebody doesn't put something in it. Those things are telling you how to be safe so that you don't have as much of a chance of becoming a victim of rape. That is not victim blaming. That is trying to help people from getting into that situation in the first place. How difficult is that to understand? Is there something wrong up there that you can't understand that? I mean, why would you be against trying to help somebody who potentially could have that happen to them and saying, hey, these are things that might help? I probably should have talked a bit about the wage gap and all of those other things, but quite frankly, people know by now. If you want to get high figures when you're working, try and get a job that pays well and work the hours. And it's not a wrong thing that women take more time off than men because they have to raise kids and everything, but the genders are different, as I said. And they're not being paid less. If you are actually being paid less, you can go to court because of the Equal Pay Act, and you will win because of that. Because that is against the law. People have won because they were being paid less. How can you say that the wage gap exists and yet the Equal Pay Act exists as well? I don't understand how that works. And I know I've been rambling on for a while, but I have one more thing I want to talk about. That whole representation in the media thing. Who cares? Firstly, there will mostly be white people in, say, a movie that's set in America because there are mostly white people in America. So if you put in like 50% black people, you're kind of overrepresenting them. And there's nothing wrong with putting other people in. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that trying to artificially inflate the numbers of the certain races or certain genders representation is making it unfair. That is sexist because that's all you're putting them in for. You're not putting them in because of their personalities. You're just doing that to make it look good. So if you want to impress me, don't put somebody that looks like me in a movie. Put somebody interesting in a movie. I don't give a fuck what they look like. I don't care. If it's a good show and it's written well and it's directed well, or if it's a good book and it's written well, if it's just good anything, it doesn't need to have these artificially inflated numbers of different people's genders or whatever. I don't care. And what about relating to characters that aren't even fucking human? Remember the Brave Little Toaster? Remember all of those things with the appliances that had personalities, or maybe animals that had personalities? Who gives a fuck? You don't even know what the fuck is going on with them. They're not human, yet you relate to them because of their, what? Personalities. So maybe it's possible to relate to somebody even though they don't look like you? Because maybe personality is the thing that people care about, and the actions of the person and the character of who they are. Maybe you should think about that a bit. I'm sorry I'm being a bit bitchy in this part, but that just annoys me so much. I mean, you look at one of my favorite characters that I kind of relate to in the way that they make jokes and stuff. Rick Sanchez. Rick Sanchez looks nothing like me, yet he's an awesome character. Do you not see my point here? And there are some characters that I like that I don't even relate to. I do not relate to Dexter Morgan. I do not relate to Hannibal Lecter. I do not relate to fucking Voldemort. I don't relate to these people. And yet, I like their characters because they're interesting characters. As somebody who loves film, who loves creative stuff, it just annoys me so much that you're trying to restrict art. It just annoys me so much that you're trying to restrict art just for the sake of some stupid identity politics. And I'm gonna stop there because I think I've said enough. And I'm sorry for this generic video, and I promise some more interesting content in the future, but seriously, that just annoys me to no end. Now you kind of know where I got the motivation to start the channel from, because this annoys me so much that I would just be pacing around the house, ranting in my head about all of the ridiculous stuff that is so obviously ridiculous, and yet people still have to fight for it. Don't even get me started on the slam poetry. I'm gonna have to stop now. Otherwise, I'm gonna have some sort of brain aneurysm. I hope that I was kind of coherent here and I didn't just rage. But I hope you understand my reasons for not being a feminist, and I will see you in the next video.